Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Sometimes, to reach a solution, we must take unfamiliar paths. In the early 1940s, a brilliant mathematician named Abraham Wald left his homeland in Hungary, fleeing the spectre of war. He moved to the US and became part of a team at Columbia University, tasked in 1942 with an aspect of the war where the Allies were losing badly to the Nazis. It involved the many Allied planes that would leave from England but never return to their bases, having been shot down somewhere over Europe. These B-17 and B-24 bombers had 10-man crews, weighed 30 to 32 tons, and had wingspans of up to 110 feet, and were defended by machine guns planted all along the plane's entire length. Despite all this, the Allies would lose planes every day, presumably because they'd taken enemy fire and either crashed during the campaign or as they headed back over the English Channel. Wald's team had to determine how to minimize these bomber losses. They'd been poring over aircraft returning from missions and mapping out the distribution of the bullet holes across their fuselages. The plan seemed logical. You should reinforce the areas where they'd taken the most damage. But Wald saw what others had missed. He realized their sample set of data represented the survivors, the aircraft that had taken hits and still managed to return safely. There were other planes they weren't examining, ones at the bottom of the channel or in occupied territory, that hadn't made it back. This lack of data could be biasing them to look at the problem backward. The planes they couldn't sample might have been struck in areas that were more critical. Maybe the fact that they were hit in those vulnerable spots was the reason behind them crashing, and that the lack of damage in those spots on the surviving bombers simply meant they'd been lucky. The returning planes weren't the rule, they were the exception. Having flipped the problem around, the planes then received reinforcements where the damage must have been catastrophic. And from then on, many more B-17s and B-24s completed their missions, helping the Allies to victory in Europe. Some people call what Wald showed was intuition, but that's not what saved the Allied bombers. Even though his approach seemed counterintuitive, it was data that guided Wald to the solution. This is Funnel Reboot, the podcast for analytically minded marketers. Today's episode goes outside our comfort zone, showing some statistical tools in the hopes we'll get a little bit more comfortable using them to do things like what Abraham Wald did. Our guest today is someone who uses the same kind of critical reasoning to make sense of product marketing problems. He's both someone who implements analytics tools, having configured over 500 sites, and one who posts prolifically about what he's learned. He's also taught analytics at several New York colleges and speaks at regional Measure Camp events. After earning his MBA from Pennsylvania Western University and spending about 20 years in corporate analytics, he chose in 2017, with the support of his wife and 3 daughters, to set up his own firm, Albany Analytics. Listen now as he talks to us about some tools that might help you in your own marketing programs. Let's now go hear from Ateeq Ahmad.
Ateeq Ahmad, welcome to Funnel Reboot.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Very glad to be here.
You and I have often said that we can't totally trust our numbers, and that really rubs people the wrong way. But when we kind of get inside of how the sausage is made and we see how we're collecting data, what are some things that pop into your head? The numbers can sometimes mislead us. We shouldn't necessarily imagine that data doesn't lie.
Well, that's a big question, but I think some very straight answers are available, and let me go with them right away. The first thing is not everybody will give consent, and these days it is extremely important for marketers to ask for consent. It's always been important. We are just learning now that it is legally important to ask for consent. So first of all, that situation will take significant numbers off the table. The other thing that will happen is some devices, some browsers actively do not allow collection of data for certain marketing channels. Yes, Apple, and the fight between Apple and Facebook means us little guys who are looking for some understanding of our customers can feel crushed. The third thing is browser extensions that will disable tracking. Okay, that people, some people put on. But the situation is, I made it look almost like you can't track anything. That's not true. The situation is not that bleak. It's just that you should, like you said in your question, actually implied in your question, that one should look at these numbers directionally, and one should not look for exactitude. We tend to think, the other day a client asked me, why are my numbers in GA4 organic channel dropping? There can be several reasons for it. But if your numbers are 22 clicks and 500 impressions to start with, you really are not looking at the big picture. As in, like, you have a small amount of traffic, there will be fluctuations. And so that's another thing. There will be fluctuations that you cannot really define. The web is not a closed system. It's an extremely open system. So people might desire things or might want to come to your site completely beyond your understanding. It can happen. Right. Doesn't mean that it does happen, right. But sometimes, in particularly seasonal e-commerce websites, if you will. Even websites, I was working with a real estate client. Real estate has trends. And, the thing I would always suggest to people is look at directionality of the data. Of course, look for how it is gathered. Sometimes you have mistakes in data collection. Lord knows I have made some in my time, yeah? But after those fixes, look for directionality and make sure you're aware of what kind of people are coming to your site. If you're a real estate agent, you have got to look at other trends outside of the web. What are physically people doing? Okay? And that will give you some insight into your user and their data collection.
Yeah, so we've got the collection problem where I am not putting in the right measures. I didn't maybe connect a meta campaign to my Google Analytics with a pixel, so someone might be clicking through, but my GA4 tells me that was direct traffic. So we have that problem. Or I didn't add UTM parameters, and I'm taking two different types of campaigns, and they're all being swirled together in a single traffic channel, and I'm misinterpreting that. You're saying even beyond that, I could have someone who bookmarks my website. They go the entire winter season. They don't do anything, and then out of the blue, they click on it again. Maybe they've had a chat with their host, and they're like, yeah, we should sell our house in the spring. They click, they come. You're seeing it as a new visitor. Actually not. Your attribution is toast. You don't know that they are someone who you spent ad dollars on in the past to get them to know who you were. It seems like they just fell like pennies from heaven in this latest visit, and now they're ready to engage. So we got to that leads me directly to asking, well, how on earth do you think about the ads that you're going to buy? This is your hard-earned money. This is your margin, frankly, that you are giving away temporarily in the hopes that you'll get it back. What is one to do when they look at these different ones? Are any of them right? Can I think deterministically and go, oh, well, I'm going to pick that one?
I think the answer is in the question, in the sense that they are laced with their own pros and cons. Because I'm looking, I have a perspective which is from the small to medium business. And there, what I find often is that because these ad platforms, all of them, and that's their business model, they exist to make money off the ads. Okay? The secondary ambition that they have is to provide, cost conversions for you, right? And it's important. I'm not saying they're malicious. No. That's not the idea. But that's where their incentive is, right? So I have seen clients blow through a lot of money very quickly on these in all these campaigns, all these platforms, because they're built for handling very large amounts of data, built for handling large amounts of traffic. So you can buy whatever you want. In some cases, for example, if you were to go with more conservative cost per conversion, your reach will get much more limited. Your ads will not run. I'm sure you're aware of that. If you go for...
So what you mean by that is if you say, I only want something where... Yeah, you can almost assure me over a basket of visitors that bring to my site that many of them will do the conversion operation that I've won, but I'm going to pay you so little that you have to go and cherry pick the ones who seem almost dead set on buying or doing that conversion from me. Turn away a lot.
Right. So many people, at least on the small to medium side of the business, tend to, like you said, it's their margin. It's a hard-earned cash that they're putting into their marketing effort. So they are going to go more towards the conversion side of the equation, less on the cost per click, although that latter will give them, the cost per click, will give them far more reach and therefore far more of a remarketing audience. But if you have $2,000, I know this also seems a little bit big, but if you have $2,000 a week to spend on marketing campaigns for these platforms, that is less than pocket change.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of a situation that we are in. So this is sort of cutting into my work in a sense. I generally, when people ask me, well, I have this much budget, I usually don't do paid marketing work. I refer them to other people who do. But when I look at people who are spending small amounts of money on these tools, I would rather improve the website performance, perhaps, right? Or I would do, and this is very strange coming from somebody who's doing tracking on digital campaigns and on websites, but word of mouth will always be king. So if you are in the business of setting up blinds, well, your community, your neighborhood, selling door to door, getting mailers to people may be a far more effective tactic.
That work on your website that you're doing improves traffic across all channels.
Yes, sir.
Let's talk about how some of the platforms that we know and love, between CMSs and your e-commerce cart products, how can the wires get crossed so that sometimes the tracking is wrong? Like you said, if that client only had $2,000 to spend and you look at their website, what are some of the problems that you have seen where you are well in your rights to say to them, please spend that chunk of money first?
The first thing, and a lot of marketers already know it, a lot of in-house people are really, in the last 2-3 years, I see before I say it, they're cottoning on to it, right? As GA4 came in, and it is less forgiving of attribution. So what we are seeing is any variation in UTM parameters that is not recognized by GA4 is the first disaster point.
So a single UTM parameter is off.
For that particular click. So for example, I have seen people do UTM, I'm being a little more technical, but UTM dash source.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen, obviously.
Where they should have used an underscore.
Where they should have used an underscore. So a lot of attention needs to be paid on what can be tracked. Okay. And there are certain UTM parameters are one thing. There are other things that people tend to put into URLs and then think that they will automatically come through. So, for example, I had a client who was getting leads from referrals from other affiliates, and they came in as something like lead ID equals. It was not being captured in a custom dimension in GA4. Okay. And it was somehow being stripped in the URL because it was a long URL. It had other parameters. This lead ID was not coming in. So obviously the first thing you want to do is you have complex URLs, if you will, so that you want to measure your campaigns better. Make sure they work. Testing is the best thing you could do. So run a few tests. See if these things are working. Unfortunately, with GA4, you can't see data immediately. No. So you say, well, if I'm running a test and I'm looking in the real-time traffic, I may or may not see it. The best bang for your buck is to integrate GA4 with BigQuery immediately, even if you have the smallest traffic, even if you get 20 clicks a day. Because immediately you can see data coming into a table as opposed to waiting a day. And then the cost of this is so minimal. Okay, first of all, there are a lot of YouTube videos of very good people who will show you how to do this. Secondly, the cost is so minimal. I have seen clients pay as much as $30 a month for millions of rows added in. Okay, so for small businesses like me, we're basically paying for the privilege, so we're paying like 1 cent a month, okay, for this kind of granularity, and it can help you fix a lot of other things on your website. Again, I won't go into too much details, but single-page websites have their own tracking concerns. Setting up BigQuery will help.
Yeah. So I really like that. The way I've heard it put is, you have two types of data that you're always collecting on your website. You have the one we normally think of, which people call descriptive analytics. So what's happening on the website? But beside that, you have diagnostic, which is how is that data being collected? And does that information seem to be replicable? What are some ways when you do have it set up right that we can get steered wrong back into the ways that companies want to make decisions with their hard-earned data? We talked about cost per conversion and kind of tightening that screw too tight. What about ROAS?
Oh, well, ROAS is a good metric. Again,
why don't we start with a definition?
Oh, return on ad spend. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Return on ad spend, effectively, if you're spending $100 in ads or other campaigns that you can quantify, $100 in marketing spending, and you're getting $200 in revenue.
Right. So it's a $200 divided by the
and so you get a number 2.
Right. Which sometimes people will put into a double figure. I've seen that done. Because otherwise you get into hundreds of percent.
Right.
So
right.
When you hear somebody say, I have a $3 ROAS, what they're actually saying is for every $1, I'm getting $3 back.
Indeed.
It's a 300%.
Indeed. Again, this number is dangerous to look at on a daily grain even. I would say, if you go look at your data, you will find that there is a 7-day cyclicity in your GA4 almost invariably. So we have every day of the week has its own cadence. So by definition, you know that at least 7 days or a week is an interval that you should always consider.
So just as you said before, with waiting a day for GA4, be prepared to wait 7 days.
7 days.
And not even to mention that most of the campaigns that we've been talking about this whole time have a learning phase. So
Indeed.
You need to start early, and you need to be prepared to be patient for enough data to collect before you even know it.
Before you even know it. Indeed. And there's again, you look at the trend over time. If it is skewing up, great. However, you should also look at this ROAS number not as if, like you said, let's look at the example of that $3, right? It's not as if that's the only thing you're spending. Return on ad spend of $3 doesn't mean that your profit jumped 300%. All it means is, in the way we are measuring this, the lift was 3x for those campaigns. How much of those, let's say we're looking at a particular season, how much of that lift would have happened by itself? It's a summer season, it's a swimwear brand. I know this is getting more complex, we won't go there, but again, all in this entire conversation, what I would like to highlight is, yes, be happy with numbers rising. Just be prepared to understand that you have to look at everything more conservatively than we naturally do. Because a lot of times, even people like me, who are just setting things up and giving you news, look, everybody wants to give you good news. It's not that they're trying to be malicious, not at all. It gives you such a high to give a client some good news, right? So if I send them, look, this is a report and it shows you that these campaigns performed wonderfully well. It's good for all of us. The creative people are happy. The marketing folks are happy. The analyst is happy. The client is, of course, delighted, right?
Yes.
But in all of this delight, we just have to be sure that we don't go overboard. Try to dig a little deeper into these numbers like ROAS to see what other costs are not being measured into that.
Lest a marketer think that all of the ROAS data represents all of what they have to worry about. Somebody just needs to go in front of their CFO or perhaps the owner of the company. That person will realize very quickly that ROAS does not include fixed costs. If it is let's say, a low margin item, right, that is a loss leader for us, to go to them and say you have a high ROAS, they will say, I've already pulled out a fixed cost, and even with that high ROAS, you're losing money on that product. Right? So
Indeed.
We have, it is so far away from ROI that we must be very careful with using, and I sometimes even just call it like a marketed ROAS, because if you're selling something that involves anything B2B, there will be the cost of your sales team that is also involved. Their salaries get paid.
Indeed.
Not even to mention the back office. So you can't just take something as simple as that. And I think this is the theme that we keep hitting on here is these dollars have to eventually be integrated into a larger set of financial statements before we can truly deterministically saying your marketing is working.
Exactly.
But I want to head to, let's swivel around. I know you're well versed in stats and have taught this. What are some of the ways that we can start to question the data that we're seeing to understand whether or not that up and to the right graph is something that we can take to our boss with pride, or if we had better show some caution first and then dig into it to see whether or not that data is truly representing some progress on our part?
Oh, this is an absolute academic study in its own right. But in just a few months that we've all actually all of those people who have Shopify stores will understand this. We've all been struggling with the fact that Shopify and GA4 data do not match.
Right.
In some cases, there's a slight variance. There always has been. Okay, we understand GA4 does not collect every transaction, everything. But now what has happened is we have to, the Google and YouTube app has not been functioning very well, to put it politely. Yeah.
Okay.
And people have tried to use a custom pixel implementation to collect data from GA4.
All right.
Invariably, sometimes duplication in GA4 happens. Suddenly you realize, oh my goodness, I am starting to get 2x revenue. This is great, except...
That's not real.
So what I would say is in the most basic tools that we use, so Excel, Google Sheets, there is a very basic metric that I would look at trended and time series data.
Yes.
Is correlation. It does not require you to... Basically, the idea is that if two pieces of information are moving like two banks of a river, then you're talking about a very good correlation. Okay? And yes, you can use, if you use a large amount of data, when I say a large amount, I mean 30 records or more, usually. No statistician, I'm not actually a statistician yet, I want to be, will give you numbers that are exact. They'll give you with some confidence, right? That's the first preface. So I would say a larger time series, maybe 3-4 weeks of data. Look at how numbers are flowing in comparison to different channels. Okay. Yes. And this is one of the big bugbears that Facebook, look, I am one individual. Facebook is a very large corporation.
Yep.
This is not even a David versus Goliath fight. Okay. But what I'm thinking is they have a way of measuring when their ad is seen, when an impression is seen. I don't quite agree with it because they say, well, even if one pixel is seen, we presume that the ad is seen.
Right. Not all of it was in the viewport.
Yes, sir. Not all of it was in the viewport. Anyways, if you look at those numbers, you look at Facebook's description of clicks being sent to the website, and if you look at the clicks received in GA4, and if you're getting those numbers to match, you're in a great place. But many a time, they are varying tremendous. So how do you go back to your seniors who are paying for the campaigns and say, well, it's working. We're getting 20,000 impressions on Facebook. Well, they say you're getting 3,000 sessions in Google Ads. Yes, you will say, well, they are two different things. They are true, but there is no way to compare this discrepancy and wish it away. And
point of the exercise is to try and figure out how tightly correlated they are.
Yes.
And there are cheap and cheerful ways to do this.
Yes.
You can export both sets of data to Google Sheets. You can even now type into Google Sheets, and I will admit that I've done this. Give me a regression.
Yes.
Yes. And it'll put in, you can even do a simple pivot table, which will show you a scatter plot, and then you can get some idea what is a number that we can hold on to with a correlation that gives us full confidence or no confidence that these two numbers are at least moving in the same direction.
Most of the time I've seen, this is in social science subjects. I remember older stories, Journal of Consumer Marketing and so on. If you had a correlation coefficient, Pearson correlation coefficient of like 0.3 or 0.4, you were like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. That means basically 44% of the discrepancy, 44% of the data is sort of explained with, that they're moving together. But in our data sets, we are very fortunate that we get massive extremely high correlation coefficients. So I regularly see on the lower side 0.4 if I'm comparing purchase to view item, as in like how many people viewed items on the website and how many people purchased. I regularly see, which is a very less likely to be correlated, I regularly see something like 0.4, 0.5.
Or something like you said, a YouTube ad was shown. YouTube said it resulted in purchase. Your own GA data said that product page was shown, and that resulted in purchase. Basically, that those two things are both saying the same thing, that purchase came from that activity. And you see that even higher, right? 0.5.
Yes, sometimes I do.
How do you convince your CFO, who lives in a world where there shouldn't be anything less than 0.99? How do you convince them that 0.6 or 0.7 is decent?
I think many organizations that have that kind of situation of like 0.99, in that sort of situation, I think we need to do it's very hard for an outsider or an agency, or even a person who is CFOs are highly paid folks and we're just analysts, right? But I think there is a lot of value in plain speaking and explaining. It's not like, you're not trying to hurt anybody or anything. All you're trying to do is explain what this actually means, right? And this is a very important point that you just made. I wouldn't use a metric that I cannot explain or that audience does not understand. I do two things when I do that. That audience kind of perceives that and gets defensive, that you're too stupid to understand what I'm saying. One.
We've hit a data literacy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And the other thing, if I were to do this, is that then they don't know this is some kind of thing out there. They don't know how to influence it. It's kind of magic, unknown. If not even good magic, like I don't know what the sorcery is.
Right.
The very important thing for all of us is, I think you hit on this point that you made, hit so many different things, is that we need cooperation from everyone. Everyone needs cooperation from everyone to be successful here. There's no one star,
I flip that around and say that how this absolutely fails is when someone dismissively says, I don't need to understand what you do. I want it to be explained on my terms.
Oh.
Be that a CFO, be that anybody. It's not going to work. So that I must be willing enough. Let's say I'm a CFO and you start talking about consent management and that you've implemented consent V2 on Google Tag Manager, and all of a sudden you are now monitoring the choice of people to not be tracked on your website.
Right.
And that GA4, for example, is now synthetically inserting conversion stats. That's an uncomfortable reality.
Yes,
That's almost we're now into kind of how I hear physicists talking about quantum mechanics.
I understand.
It sounds very weird, but I suppose what you're saying is work with your colleagues, get them to push through that uncomfortable feeling.
Yes.
So that they can understand the limits of the data that you are giving them, and that sometimes even a 0.6 correlation is enough to make a business decision on.
Indeed. I on that consent management part, I learned a few things in that if I'm saying upfront to my clients that we need to manage consent, we should have done it before vMarketers, but we need to manage consent correctly because it builds. Actually, if you have a banner that says give consent and you honor it, it breeds more trust in your customers. Lord knows customers are not trusting a lot of brands, right? The other thing is, if you're upfront in saying that, but also giving the bad news upfront, is that there will be a traffic loss or perceived traffic loss. Perceived because, you see, those people who are not going to give consent, and I've seen this in the data as well, and I'll urge other marketers to go in and look. How many of your sessions are one-page sessions? That is bouncers, right? I've seen this when consent is deployed. Engagement metrics rise. So the engagement rate in GA4 rises. Why? Because that one-page person isn't giving consent, isn't counted, isn't there in the data. Only the people who are more engaged are in your data set, and that becomes a much better data set to use.
Back to what you were talking about in social sciences. I want to run a sociology experiment or a psychology experiment. Is it right to take to those people who, let's say I'm standing at the front entrance of this lab that they're going to walk in to do the experiment, and I'm there with my clipboard, and somebody walks up and I say, if you enter this building, you're taking part in this experiment. And they say, no thanks. And they walk out. Well, who in their right mind as a scientist would look at that test data and say, I give a damn about the person who turned around and walked the other way? Of course I don't need them. Why in the world of web marketing are we so fixated on getting big numbers that we want to include those people? What you said makes absolute sense. And we just need to have the courage to say, I don't need that data. I can still understand the behavior of my customers, even if I'm only counting the ones that really wanted to be counted.
Indeed. I think we, over the last few years, or decades even, we have gotten used to and, in a sense, spoiled by the idea of having census-level data for our customers. Before that, the idea of statistics was born based on samples because you couldn't know the population.
Right.
So I think we should get more comfortable.
If it's good enough for them,
then it should be good enough for us.
You're describing a sine wave that we went through over, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
In the early 2000s, it was capture all the things.
Right.
And then it got we doubled down on it, social media. Oh my gosh, we have things like Cambridge Analytica.
Oh my goodness, right? Yes.
And now we've kind of come through on the other side of, no, don't capture everything, capture those things. Back to using some of those great statistical means that I know you like to talk about, like t-tests and chi-square. Can you maybe just give us a flavor of when we might want to look into either of those things to see whether or not some time series data that we'll have on our hands is really telling us what we think it is?
Oh, great. Let me, this is again powered by the idea that we are always looking for higher and higher in metrics that we want to become higher. Metric of somebody saying, well, our organic traffic increased by 3% this month. Logically, it's correct. Because the numbers say so, right? But that's where I would use a t-test, where I would say, yes, it increased 3%, but is it significant? Okay? And a test of significance, again, is built into the things we use. So Google Sheets has it. I'm sure very soon, once GA4 gets more robust, and these things tend to happen, you will start seeing t-tests being incorporated. Already, there's alerts in GA4 with anomaly detection and Bayesian statistics, which are not necessarily very easy to understand. I don't understand them entirely myself, but I have a sense of what they're saying. When you come across trends over time, I would look at t-tests. When I look at experiments that are running concurrently, of course you use A/B testing tools,
yes,
if you can. But apart from that, there's other tools at your disposal. So if you're running multiple campaigns of the same type, I would use a chi-square test, again built in to your Google Sheets. At no time am I saying that you should use all of these together, okay? Because of very simple things that every time I have to explain these tests to people, I have to think myself as to whether I'm saying the right thing, because t-tests are of different types. So you want to make sure that you understand what you're doing, right? More importantly, you're able to explain to the person you're talking to in plain words that, what are you trying to tell them?
Can we not say that significance, what that really means is that your detected difference is beyond what could be explained by error or noise.
Yes, sir.
Maybe how the engineering that it takes for a bridge to stand up. A person says, okay, I have figured out how to make this bridge strong enough that if a very strong wind comes along, it will stand up. Well, how strong? Well, no, we're not talking about a 500 kilometer an hour wind. Nothing's going to withstand that. But I can tell you that compared to winds that I have sampled before, this bridge will stand up within that bell curve if it's those winds. And other fields are very comfortable with talking about this kind of thing.
Yes.
I think because marketing involves stakeholders, we sometimes forget that we need to use those same ways of describing things, plus or minus 3%.
Yes.
If we can get comfortable with saying those things, I mean, it's good enough for medicine. It's good enough for engineering. It's a lot of things that's the proper way to do it.
Indeed. I think also, you talked about error. You talked about, what I would also want to say is that there's general variance. Remember what we talked about, 7-day cyclicity? General variance, you want to account for that. And these metrics allow you to do that if you look at it from a good enough sample, I have a feeling that we have been taught in marketing, or we have been told as marketers, that we are creative types. We should not look at numbers. I think we can do both. There is no such hyper specialization. For example, I'll name another one which I see email marketers helped a lot with, which is RFM modeling, which again is not actually using, it says RFM modeling, sounds very complex. It's basically ranking your customers based on how frequently they shop from you, how recently they've shopped from you, and how much money they've spent. And you're ranking them in criteria.
Okay. But the person you're sitting across from, they may be a content writer.
Right.
And they're turning up their nose at you talking about their beautiful prose that they have sweated over as if it's just something that you nudge someone to want. So I guess I'm you know what, we should do both. That content writer has to be willing to let their writing be judged according to numbers, just as advertising media spent is being judged by numbers.
Correct. But there's also one more thing that I discovered, which was so heartwarming. So I got to talk about it. So this writer is writing some great content. I look at it and I say, my goodness, this is good, useful content. The business is saying to them, look, nobody is going from your content to submit a lead. So your content may be good to read, but it's not adding value to the business. But this is wrong. I submit to you, this look of that particular blog and content is wrong, because when you're buying ads on Google search, people are actively looking for something.
Right.
They are going to do said something, or at least that's the assumption.
That's the mode they're in.
Sometimes when people land on, not all the time, but many a time when people land on good content, rich content, which is ranking on Google, that's providing value to people, right? I look at it from a long-term view. So what I do is I introduce this to that particular client. I said, look, the blog and in immediate session conversion is not where it's at. And I'm sure a lot of us people who are hearing are getting it as well. Over the long term, how is that blog performing with people? So whoever saw the blog, how likely are they over time versus other people who didn't to actually submit leads?
So that lead, you work backwards.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're into what RFM is great at, once you have that final action in place, and I'm going to use in the show notes something that you gave me, which runs through how someone's demeanor changes from the very first time they see an ad to the 20th time.
Yes.
And they go from this pesky bit of copy that I don't even really pay attention to how in my life have I been able to survive without this product? I must buy it right now. So I think what we're acknowledging here is we're dealing with human beings, and people are unpredictable.
Indeed.
And now in large numbers, we can statistically describe people. But when we get down to an individual level, it gets that corny, where somebody may even need to say something 20 times for it to register.
Indeed. So I think measuring everything the same way is also something that is simplistic, and the analysts do it. And I want to caution against. Every business activity should have its own measurement protocol, right? And should be judged by how it performs based on the assumptions we made at the time when we started measuring it, and also the results we wanted at the time we're measuring it. So if that is very clear, as opposed to, look, run ads for me and make it just go viral. There's no metric behind that. Yeah, the more the better. A previous guest on your podcast, Tim Wilson, has written out a book called Analytics the Right Way. You have got to have some targets in mind, because otherwise, look, you may fail. That's okay. We don't put targets because we don't want to be coming in as, but there is a fail and there is a blunder. So fact is, if you fail to reach, say, that $3 we talked about in ROAS, but you made 1.5, the assumptions could have been wrong before. Our creatives may not have aligned as well. But if we are all working as a team, we're able to identify where to improve.
So we're intellectually honest enough to admit it didn't work out the way we wanted. The solution isn't to fire somebody. The solution is to learn from it.
Exactly. And you see, with setting up an end goal, what you also do before you run any campaigns or do anything is that you have already got buy-in. And there is nobody, I think, in a business environment, when they see something not quite up to par, are not engaged enough to say, okay, how can I contribute? If they are part of the decision making or they're part of the buy-in, then that they'll be like, it didn't work out, huh? Maybe, what about we did this or that? So that you get more ideation from more people. Rather than one marketer sitting, sweating at midnight at their table thinking, what can I do tomorrow to show that I have some value?
I think the other thing that allows me to have less anxiety about this is understanding that in our free market economy, I'm not trying for absolute perfection. And that the customer sees something in the way that I'm approaching that they like a little bit better than what the competitor is doing, they'll buy from me.
Indeed. That's a very, 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 very good point.
Ateeq, I can't thank you enough. If people want to reach out to you and find out more about what you do and where you do it, where can they go?
Oh, then they can go to my website, albanyanalytics.com. There's a place right there to book some time with me.
What social channels do you like to have?
I hang out a lot on LinkedIn. So you can find me, Ateeq Ahmad, on LinkedIn. And I am always happy to have conversations with at least a few kind of people. Those who have, sometimes people have just one question and they don't need to hire a consultant. I don't want them to hire a consultant. Just reach out to me, ask the question. I'll give you answers if I know them. The other type of people I really want to talk to is people who are starting out. I have been an educator. I want to be an educator. So I want to be able to help them figure out. Sometimes, of course, this is too high a mark. I can't guide someone, but I can definitely be available if they have questions about, well, where should I head? What should I do? What should I learn? Particularly if they want to know what I have learned and where I have learned it. So these are the two particular kinds of people. And otherwise, of course, anybody who wants to have a chat, I'm always there.
Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.